Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos everyone. This week once again we have a double header, two portions, Achremot and Kedoshim, and we actually continue a theme we spoke about 2 weeks ago, where we mentioned that holiness from a Jewish point of view is not relegated and limited to holy space and holy times and holy people, unique moments. Holiness pervades and enters into every aspect of our lives. And that's why this Shabbat we start talking about the high priest on the holy day of Yom Kippur in the holies of holies, but then we continue talking about a vast array of disparate laws that speak about taking care of your employee, looking after somebody who is in need, loving the next human being, not talking slander, being honest in your business practices. It speaks about such diverse areas of human activity. All of those come under the general umbrella of be holy. Holiness needs to extend and manifest in every aspect of our lives. But I want to share one particular verse which can be interpreted and is explained in so many different ways. The verse says that these are the commandments and the statutes that I'm giving you, v'chai bohem, and you will live in these commandments. And obviously the words, and you will live in these commandments, needs some kind of explanation, interpretation. So there are different approaches. There is a more ethical approach, which is presented by Nachmanides, by the Ramban, who says, these are the laws, these diverse laws of holiness that explain what life really is all about. If one does not subscribe to these standards of living with holiness, idos nicht kein Leben, we're actually not living. Life is defined by meaning, by purpose, by quality, by an ethical theme that runs through our lives. These are my commandments, v'chai bohem, they will define what life is. Because a life that is void of aspiring to holiness in every aspect of it is not really a life at all. So that's one approach. Keep my commandments, v'chai bohem, they define the aspiration of really living and living meaningfully in this world. Then you have a completely different explanation, which is much more legal. Both the Talmud in the tractate of Yuma and in Sanhedrin speak about the legal requirements of fulfilling a mitzvah, extending up to and only to the point that one is going to preserve life. So the Gemara in Yuma says, how do we know that a person has to keep Shabbat? But what happens if it comes into a situation where one has to choose between preserving life or keeping Shabbat? One obviously has to surrender the requirements of Shabbat in deference to preserving life. If a person is giving birth on Shabbat or any requirements that are needed for a human being, they transcend the importance of keeping Shabbat. How do we know that? Because the verse says, these are my commandments, v'chai bohem, and you will live in these commandments. The obligation is to life. And if there is a conflict between keeping a commandment and preserving life, life comes first. So it's a legal code. And the Sanhedrin actually mentions that there are the big three commandments of not committing adultery and not committing idolatry and not murdering. If one has to choose between preservation of life or the fulfillment of one of those commandments, kill somebody or I will kill you, God forbid, one has to surrender one's life. So those are the big three. But outside of those, v'chai bohem, all the commandments I'm giving you, life takes precedence. Then there's a Hasidic interpretation of what does it mean, v'chai, and you will live in them. The Chidush Arim says that these are the commandments that I'm giving you. Live the commandments. Be inspired, be passionate, be excited, be enthusiastic when you fulfill a mitzvah. Don't get up in the morning and walk with a burden. Oh, you see, schwer zu sein Yid. Look how hard and difficult and painful it is to be Jewish. Look what the load we have to carry. Never. It is v'chai bohem. Bring life into every single commandment you do. Do it with a zest, do it with an energy. Live in your commandment so that it becomes a part of an energy in your life that promotes living and life. That's the third explanation. So we've had ethical, legal, and a Hasidic interpretation. And maybe a thought that relates to motivation in general. When are we more motivated as Jews? We are often much more motivated when it comes to responding to pain, to loss, and to sadness. When I was a yeshiva student, I used to go on Friday afternoons to the Tachana Merkazit, the central bus station in Tel Aviv, and I would give up my free hours on a Friday afternoon to put on tefillin with soldiers in Israel. And I knew that when there were 20 soldiers lined up to put on tefillin, it meant that there were difficult times, that there were precarious, dangerous. It was a time in which one was nervous about what was happening on the borders. That is the natural instinct of a human being. We turn to God much more often when we are in pain, when we are concerned, when we are vulnerable, than when things are going smoothly. When people were not interested in coming over to put on tefillin, it often meant that times were better, there was relief, there wasn't the same anxiety. In our history, when have we turned to God more? When we've been in pain, when we've been on the receiving end of anti-Semitism, and we have been hurt and we are troubled, or when we are expansive and happy and settled and wealthy and everything is going right? It is human nature that one generally turns to God when one is dealing with pain than when one is dealing with gain. In fact, if you want to quantify it in terms of two experiences that we do in Jewish life, one is Kiddush and the one is Kaddish. What brings people to shul, Kaddish or Kiddush? Do we come to shul because we have to recite Kaddish, we've lost somebody? So often, the minyanim are kept together by people that need to recite Kaddish. But Kiddush, when we're coming to shul to recite something that brings sanctity, that brings positivity, the ushering in of Shabbat, may be less motivational than having to deal with the sad and the difficult moments. That is the natural instinct of a human being, and one cannot judge human beings for turning to God more in distress than when things are going well. So perhaps the verse is suggesting it to us. These are the commandments I'm giving you. V'chai bohem. Live in the commandments with a positivity, with a life, with a vibrancy. Don't let Judaism be only post-Holocaust. Don't say that we need to be fulfilled Jews because look at all the troubles that have happened to us and we need to emerge, which is true. But don't limit the Jewish experience to emergence from sadness. There has to be a positive goal. We are about to bring redemption. We believe in a more positive future. Mashiach is going to change the world. We live with hope. So let the mitzvahs that we perform be such, v'chai bohem, that we are motivated by life rather than responding to the loss of it. At any rate, let us try and fulfill as many as commandments as we can. They all constitute an element of sanctity, of holiness, by Jewish definition, which pervades every element of our lives. V'chai bohem. Let's bring life into it. Let's make sure that we live as Jews. Have a beautiful Shabbos.